Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Ushanka Show, stories about life in the Soviet Union. Recently I made the video about my grandfather Sergei and his log cabin in northern Ukraine that he built in 1950s, and if by any chance you missed that video, a link will be below in the comment section. As I mentioned in that video, log cabins were mostly popular in northern Ukraine as well of course as Belarus and Russia, because there were plenty of forest where you could harvest logs. But in central and southern Ukraine, the other type of village housing was more predominant. Those homes were called Mazanka. And actually these Mazanka houses with white walls and the roofs made of straw or reeds are considered to be like a traditional Ukrainian houses. But of course not every Ukrainian Mazanka home was picture perfect. For example, I took this photo not far away from Kiev in a small village where my sister-in-law's parents used to live. And of course I need to mention one of my favorite Soviet era cartoons, Zhil-Bil Dog. There used to be a dog, where they showed typical Ukrainian village with Mazanka homes. And what I'm planning to do today is to show you guys 1968 Soviet vintage movie about construction of Mazanka home in Kharkiv region. But before we do that, I would like to tell you a couple more things about brick wood burning stoves that I talked about in my previous video. So when my grandfather Sergei was building his log cabin in the 1950s, he spent almost a week looking for a perfect location for the stove, which is kind of like an anchor of the whole house. But he didn't build the stove. He had to hire pichnik. So that's the person who specializes in building these brick wood burning stoves. Pichnik. And depending on the area, the wood burning stoves could be of different design. I saw this stove in my brother's in-laws house. So you see it looks quite different. So behind the curtain there's the main burning area, main part. And to the left there's a so-called lizhak. So there's almost like you can use as a small bed. And there's a little door where you can also have a fire. So if you need just a small heating going on, you can just burn wood there. Otherwise you cook and you heat the whole house in the main area on the right. And then of course there's a smaller area on the top where you can also sleep. Okay, boys and girls, and now it is movie time. And before we begin, I would like to remind you this was filmed in 1968. And 11 years prior, the Soviet Union managed to beat America and launched into space the very first artificial satellite, Sputnik 1. And 7 years prior, on April 12, 1961, Yuri Gagarin became the first human in space, and it was also achieved by the USSR. And after we're done watching this movie, it's about 2 minutes 48 seconds, we'll watch it again episode by episode with my commentary. So in the beginning you see two guys riding the horses through the mud. They actually mix in clay with straw. This is so-called taloka. So they had an area right on the street where they piled up clay. There's a tractor with the tanker adding water, and then people tossing the straw, and there's two guys riding horses. So they have two mixers, not powerful ones, just 1 horsepower each, and they ride the horses mixing up the clay with the straw to apply on Mazanka. Next, the guys carrying prepared mix, so clay with straw, and you see the guy throwing lumps of clay on the wall, and this is how you build the walls of Mazanka house. And so far we haven't seen a single piece of equipment, just shovels and pitchforks, and it's almost look like Amish building a barn together. Here's a bunch of Soviet collective farm workers came to help neighbors to build their home. And once again, a lot of manual labor, people using, we call it in Russian nasilki, I don't know if you can call those things stretchers. Obviously wet clay is heavy. Meanwhile, somewhere up there in space, Soviet satellites already circling the Earth. Okay, so my favorite part of building Mazanka is actually tossing lumps of wet clay on the walls to make them stick. But this is fun too. This is what the name Mazanka came from. The way they spread the clay and smooth it out, they mazhut. So that's Mazanka from the verb mazat. And I'm not sure how to translate it in English, because mazat is something like smudging. So they smudging the clay on the wall and make it smooth. That's the origins of the word Mazanka. And exactly the same technique is used inside of the house. So instead of drywall, you just throw wet clay on the walls and then you smooth it out. And it looks like two ladies doing the final touches, and then of course you need to wait for the clay to dry, and then you can apply chalk to make your Mazanka pretty white. And here's probably the most interesting part of this whole movie. This is the new owner. This is the young guy that's being caught, and that's how you celebrate. And this is his wife. They're being brought to the taloka, that mud pit, clay pit, and they roll you in this dirty water to celebrate building their new home. Same going on with his wife. She looks pretty happy, although there'll be a lady in the background shortly after right now. Yeah, look at that. Oh, that's ridiculous. This lady like, stop it, you bastards. And it looks like Mazanka is finished, and now it's time to wash up and prepare for festivities. Not sure if it's a lunch or dinner, but people are washing their boots, washing their hands. Once again, the village has no running water, so people got water out of the wells, it's in the buckets, and they just wash everything right there on the street. And here's the brand new Mazanka home, although it looks like it's already 100 years old. And here's people having a meal. Here it looks like they're cold and they dressed warm, and here looks like they're warm. So maybe there was breakfast and then lunch, or it was filmed on a different day, but like here you could tell it's warm. And believe me, those glasses with clear liquid, it's not water. Everyone is drinking moonshine. That's how you celebrate. That's hilarious. I thought it was quite an interesting glimpse in the life of Ukrainian collective farm workers back in 1968. So let's see what else Soviet Union managed to achieve besides building homes from clay, straw, and cow shit. 1957, first satellite in space, Soviet Union. 1957, first animal in space, Soviet Union. 1959, first lunar satellite flyby. 1959, first lunar contact. 1961, first man in space. 1961, first planetary flyby by Venus. 1963, first woman in space. 1965, first spacewalk in space. 1966, first lunar landing. Everything done by Soviet Union. And modular space station was launched for the very first time by the Soviet Union in 1968, while Ukrainian collective farm workers built homes using horses, shovels, pitchforks, straw, clay, and cow shit. Remember this photo? This is 1978 and my grandparents in northern Ukraine. Dirt road. They had to borrow a horse and a wagon from a collective farm so they can bring some firewood from the collective farm forest so they can stay warm in the winter. 1978. And what's really sad, it never bothered me before when I was a kid. You know, I go to stay with my grandparents for the summer break, and it was like going back in time 50 years, maybe 100, because my grandparents, didn't have running water, didn't have indoor plumbing, no TV, no refrigerator, no gas or electric stove. You know, they had cellar to keep the food cold, cooked in a brick stove. They had to borrow a horse to plow their field. So everything was so Amish, except they did have electricity. And I remember my shock when I came to America back in 1995 and I had a chance to visit local farms, and I actually worked in one of the farms here in Southwest Michigan. And I went to the farmer's home and I was shocked, like, oh my goodness, these people live, they have all the conveniences, air conditioning, indoor plumbing, they're doing great. So no wonder when Nikita Khrushchev loosened up the rules after the death of Stalin, millions of young people abandoned the villages and moved to the big cities, just like my parents did. And now, of course, all the countryside is paying the price. I mean, it began way back in the 70s, went through the 80s and 90s. Now it's like the final stage of decay. Especially like northern Ukraine is really bad. It's like every other house is abandoned. You know, old people died, young people live in the cities, they don't want to come back. It's pretty ugly. Well, I hope you enjoyed this story about Ukrainian Mazanka homes, and please share your thoughts in the comment section. If you like this video, you know what to do. Otherwise, we'll talk to you soon. До свидания. Goodbye.